Welcome to the Cyber Center for Biblical Studies. Hi, my name is Herb Bateman. Today we're going to review a book entitled Counterfeit Gods by Tim Keller. We have with us Pastor Lee Compson from Milford First Brethren Church here to introduce us to this book. Lee, welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here, Herb. Thanks for having me.
So Lee, tell me what the thesis of this book is.
The central thesis of this book is that although many people today would probably associate idol worship with something that ancient cultures and primitive societies dealt with, actually in our current society, in our current world, even in our own hearts, idol worship is very much a dangerous problem and something we must address as Christians, especially. He defines an idol not as just a wooden statue people bow down to, but he defines an idol as something we look to for things that only God can give. And I found that to be a pretty good general description of what many people are chasing after and looking for in life. And he even describes the human heart. He calls it an idol factory, that we are wired to worship something, to chase after things. And so that is kind of his thesis and where he begins to lead us down as Christians, as pastors, how we need to address this problem in a variety of ways.
Okay. What are some of the issues he addresses? Like how does his book unfold to get at this thesis?
Yeah, he has 4 main idols that he addresses, but he starts off using the biblical text. He uses scripture to point out how these idols have always been things people sought after in place of God. And he begins the book by talking in general ways about general idols and the general pursuit of things other than God or apart from God. He actually uses Abraham as a biblical example and just the development of Abraham's life, even after God had promised him with the covenant to make him a father of many nations. Even how in Abraham's life as it unfolded, Abraham had problems with idols and things that God had to remove and examine and adjust in his own heart and life. But the main specific idols he talks about are love, money, success, and power and glory is kind of a combined 4th one. And he uses, again, biblical stories to connect and put flesh on how these idols play out in our lives personally. With love, he talks about Jacob and his relationships with Rachel and Leah. He talks about, with money, he uses Zacchaeus as an example. He also gets into many of Jesus' New Testament teachings, but Zacchaeus is kind of the prime example for that. With success, he uses the Old Testament example of Naaman and Elisha. Naaman was this foreign soldier, this warrior, this high up in a political system, and he had to essentially become a servant in order to find healing and find God. With power and glory, he uses Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel, a well-known political story that Nebuchadnezzar had to be humbled by God. And so he draws, again, comparisons and points of relevancy between these biblical stories and present-day issues that are very relevant for us.
What spurred you on to read this book? What was it that caused you to pick the book up and to read it to begin with?
Well, it had been recommended to me by another pastor, and so as part of a men's ministry we're actually doing at our church, we picked this book for the whole group to read, and so that was kind of where it started, but my attention was grabbed just from the opening pages, just because it's very convicting. Tim Keller does a great job of making it real and making it personal for the reader, and just making it very practical and the struggles everybody faces, men, women, children, old and young. It doesn't really matter. He makes the connection in a lot of really good ways about how we develop kind of idol worship for many different facets of life.
What would you say was the most insightful thing about the book? What was it that that was really stood out in your mind as something that you took away from and you thought, I never thought about it from that angle?
That's a good question. One of the biggest takeaways I had from the book was seeing idol worship in all of these stories. Now, every once in a while, you'll come across a story when you're reading through the Bible, and you might say, oh yeah, that's this guy is chasing after this thing when he should be chasing after what God wants him. And you can identify it in some obvious ways, but when you really get into it with a lot of these flawed characters that the Bible presents in the Old and New Testament, you realize how central idol worship is to our existence, unfortunately. And without God, without seeking Christ, we are hopeless. And even if we fail to attain what we are searching after, we will feel deflated and discouraged and oppressed. But even the flip side of that, he points out, and this would be another major point I walked away with, even when we attain the things we've been dreaming of and our goals and our vision, and oftentimes we'll look around and be like, okay, so what's next? So those were some of the takeaways that I was just really personally encouraged by and convicted by.
Okay. With every book, there's always something that you wish he had covered. At least that's been my experience. Did you feel that way about this book? Do you wish there was something that he had covered that he didn't cover?
I was, as I was reading through it, and I kind of knew the structure of the book, I was wondering, well, aren't there other categories and other idols maybe people are choosing to seek? Significance, acceptance, fame, and those are all corollaries to some of these general categories, but he doesn't always maybe touch on those specific things. It's not maybe a comprehensive list of all the idols people are chasing after. So there were some significant ones that maybe were left out or left unresearched or underdeveloped. But overall, there weren't a lot of complaints because I think he hits major ones that Christians and non-Christians alike seek after so much in our society in 2016.
Are there other books out there like this that deal with counterfeit gods, the way that he has addressed this topic?
Yeah, there's one major one I'm aware of by Kyle Idleman. It's more recent. This book was written in 2009. Kyle Idleman's was written probably in the last 4 or 5 years. His is called Gods at War, and it takes a similar approach. It talks about contemporary idols and the war we have, and really in our hearts, the spiritual war that is taking place with similar categories. I actually was at the a local Christian bookstore just last week, and I found some others. I didn't write down the titles or anything, but this is becoming more of a prevalent, popular topic, I think, within the Christian community. I think mostly because of these two books, Counterfeit Gods and Gods at War. So, yeah, this is becoming more of a realized problem. At least I hope so, if the books are any indication that are coming out. More of a realized problem that Americans need to confront in their own hearts and lives.
Well, Lee, thank you so very much. Appreciate you coming and sharing with us this book, Counterfeit Gods. And thank you for joining with us. And I trust that you might pick this book up by Tim Keller, and add it to your library. In the meantime, I trust that you will have a great day. Thank you.